Lady Bennett, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Lovely to be with you, Felicity, and please make it Natalie.
OK, thank you very much. Well, let's look at this in a little more detail then. So you think a permanent nationalisation of the big five suppliers is the way forward. Why is that?
Well, these retailers, these big five retailers, if you look at it over the last 10 years, they've paid out £23 billion in dividends to their shareholders. That's profit that's being pumped out of the system, profit that could have gone into actually particularly energy efficiency measures, which would have cut people's bills for the long term. But given we are where we are, if we nationalise those five companies and set the cap back to the £1,200 average bill, then that's going to give people a sense of certainty and security. It's going to mean that the government, as those nationalised companies, can manage the way that they work, the way that they bill people in ways that is actually good for the public good. So, for example, we could change around. At the moment, the energy you use first is the most expensive, and as you use more, it gets cheaper. We want to turn that around. So what we want to do essentially is ensure that we have an energy system that's run for the public good, not private profit. We've just seen how absolutely disastrous the privatisation has been. This is a model that has failed, and we need to ensure that we actually give people the real security of knowing they're not going to have to choose between heating and eating.
Although the opponents to this, I mean, Sir Keir Starmer of Labour, for example, says that he thinks it's a waste of public money right now to compensate the shareholders of these companies by buying them out. And he also says that this plan wouldn't bring down inflation.
Well, I think, first of all, in terms of the compensating, what we've seen is as companies have collapsed, it's the reality that always happens with these privatised systems, that when things go wrong, the state has to step in to fix the problem. So already the companies that have all collapsed, and Bulb was one of the last long ones, but people will remember a long chain of company collapses, the state has had to step in. You can't leave people without energy supplies. And so that's already cost us £2.7 billion. Renationalising is estimated to cost £2.8 billion. And then what we can do is actually ensure that rather than the companies making choices about how they run the system for private profit, you're actually making choices for the public good.
Right,
so the actual cost, the cost of the energy cap, which would be about the same, both under Labor, Lib Dem, and our plans, under the
a bit more under yours, isn't it? So Labour says it costs about 29 billion, and your nationalisation plan, you say costs about 37 billion, yeah?
Well, the 37 is bringing, because we're bringing Labour's keeping the energy cap at the level it is now. We're bringing it back to the October level. So that's about £700 a year in people's individual bills. And that £37 billion, one of the ways we're paying for that, a large chunk of that can come from the oil and gas levy. Now, I was actually in the House debating this, pointing out how ridiculous it is that the government built this enormous loophole into the oil and gas levy, which is also known as a windfall tax, or as we call it, a dirty profits tax, that if the companies can avoid paying it by investing in new oil and gas, not in new renewables, but only in new oil and gas. And that means new oil and gas investments under the government current plans. The public is subsidising to them to the tune of 94 pence in the pound. So the money is coming from.
Sure, and you want to close that, and Labour wants to close that as well. I understand that. Can I just one more thing before we let you go? Even these nationalised energy providers, though, would still have to buy energy, wouldn't they, on an international market where costs are sky high?
Exactly. I mean, that is the practical reality. That's where the energy has to come. And that's why it's a great pity that a huge damage to the British society that we haven't invested in energy efficiency, in insulation in our homes. We have some of the poorest quality of housing stock in the whole of Europe. What we need to do is put money into that so we don't need so much energy in the future. The best possible energy you can have, the cleanest, greenest and cheapest, is the energy you don't need to use. That needs to be the absolute focus going forward. And the second focus, of course, is renewables.
Well, and what about nuclear, though, Natalie? Do you need to rethink the opposition to nuclear? The Green Party in Finland has done.
No, because, there's many arguments about nuclear. And, of course, we're all gravely concerned about what's happening with the nuclear power plant in Ukraine at the moment under Russian control, and grave concerns about how that might go wrong. So there's all the old arguments against nuclear, which is we still haven't worked out what to do with the waste, the risks, etc. But the absolute killer argument now against nuclear is that it is way too slow. We're in a climate emergency now. We can put new solar panels on roofs of schools schools and public buildings and cut their costs. In a few weeks' time, we can put up new wind turbines, ideally community-owned, and I'll be putting down amendments to the energy bill when we go back in Parliament to really support community-owned energy. Do all of those things within weeks, months, a couple of years, whereas new nuclear, at the absolute earliest, you're talking 12, 15 years. It's too slow.
Good to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed.